Good morning and welcome to this Licensing Act Subcommittee. It's the 22nd of April 2022 at 10 o'clock. This committee has been called to hear an application in respect of a new premises licence for the Wood Road site at Hawley Park, Wood Road, Woolpit. I'll briefly explain the procedure. There will be a report given by the licensing officer, followed by representations made by the parties, starting with the applicant. There will be an opportunity, once the representation has been made, to ask questions on the representation from the designated speakers. Then the objectors, or those making representations on the application, will also have an opportunity to have their say. There are several representations made in writing. They have all been considered and will be considered as part of the application, but you have two designated speakers who will speak on your behalf. Again, there will be an opportunity for questions from all parties. When everybody's had their say and the applicant will have the final word when they sum up, will be a private session for the members and myself as legal advisor to consider the application and make a determination, hopefully today. There are some preliminary procedures we need to go through. This is a formal committee, so what I will do now is hand over to the chair of the subcommittee, who is Councillor Cathy Guthrie, who is the chair of the full Licensing and Regulatory Committee, and therefore is chairing this subcommittee today. So over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to this committee meeting today. Who's whistling? Is there an issue? Sorry. Hope you can hear me. Some domestic arrangements. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Any member of the public who attend a meeting and wishes to be filmed should advise the committee clerk. I think wishes not to be filmed should advise the committee clerk. So I hope you're all happy with that so far. Can I remind you of the domestic arrangements? Toilets are situated opposite the lifts outside the meeting room. Water is available outside the meeting room. If the fire alarm sounds, leave the building immediately via the fire exit and make your way to the assembly point, which is Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, which is the ground floor area, and walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs and not the lifts. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. I need to do this. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. So, apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest by councillors? Councillor Flatman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like everyone to know that I'm a lecturer at West Suffolk College. I teach events, so basically we do use once a year Hawley Barnes venue, and our students could be working there at any time. Obviously this has no bearing on decisions here today, but I just thought if anybody had seen me there with students, you would understand why. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear. Can everybody hear clearly? Thank you. Yes. So I will do the introductions. Obviously myself, I'm Cathy Guthrie, I'm the chair, Councillor Dave Muller at the end, and Councillor Julie Flatman. We also have our legal advisor, Nigel DeLew. We have our licensing officer, Kay Sanders.
Good morning.
And Kerry Chandler.
Good morning.
Morning. And our governance officer, Karen Sayer, behind us, and the member support officer, Mandy Smith, who's busy peddling like mad to get our electronics out so this can go out to the public. So, may I ask the applicants to introduce yourselves and if you're representative. So, Mr. Williams, would you introduce yourself?
Yes.
That's right, you don't have to stand up.
I'm Robert Williams, the Managing Director of the applicant, which you will notice is not myself but Hawley Park Limited, who own all the historic property and land at Hawley Park. My colleague is Mrs. Martine Silkstone, who is one of our barn venue team. Hawley Park Barn is a thriving.
You'll get the opportunity to say that. I was just introducing yourselves, if you wouldn't mind, please.
She's here not so much to answer questions, but she is the person who looks after all our PR and social media.
So will you be making any comment during the proceedings?
Not unless required, because Robert Williams needs assistance.
Right, and that's in order. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that, Mr. Silkstone. So can I ask you, Mr. Williams, have you had receipt of the procedure report and copies of all the representations?
Yes, I have had the report, the document pack, yes.
Thank you. Now, may I ask the other people to introduce themselves who will be speaking on behalf of the spokesperson? Julia Ewan, is that your good self?
Yes, Julia Ewan's a well-known spelling mistake in these hallowed halls. I'm usually called Evans.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
It's fine, no, don't worry, you got it right.
I'm
chair of Woolpit Parish Council.
Welcome. Thank you. And you'll be speaking on behalf of the Parish Council? Yes. And then we have Tracy Kettle. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Kettle and I'm a resident of Wood Road opposite Hawley Park.
And you will be speaking on behalf of the residents?
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. And Joss Roper was unable to attend, is that correct?
He's here.
Ah, right. Oh, I beg your pardon, but you won't be speaking. No, I understand. Got it now. Thank you very much. So, talking to all parties, anybody wishing to withdraw the application or representation? Mr. Williams? No. No. And Tracy Kettle, you don't wish to withdraw anything? Right. Thank you. So my question now is to the licensing officer. Have there been any requests from the parties for permission to call witnesses?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Have the parties indicated they wish to present documentary or other material?
No, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll ask each of you in turn. How long do you think it will take you to present your case, please?
I put on 10 to 15 minutes on the sheet. I hope it won't take longer than that.
Right. And going to Julia, how long do you think you'll take your presentation, please?
I would hope only 10 minutes.
10 minutes. And Tracy, if I can call you that by your first name, 10 minutes. Thank you. So we now move to the hearing. So the licensing officer will present the report and summarise the matter under consideration. So we've all got we've got copies of that. Do we have it online for the public to follow or not? Yes. So it will go up behind us, or it will go on?
No, I think it's just accessible through the website.
Through the website that you will have already seen. Right. Fine. Would you like to present your case then, please?
Thank you, Chair. This hearing is to determine an application made for the grant of a new premise licence made under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 by Hawley Park Limited at Wood Road site, Hawley Park, Wood Road, Woolpit. The application was received by the Licensing Authority on the 25th of February 2022, and a copy of this is attached to this report as Appendix A. The application made has been subject to the statutory consultation period as prescribed by regulation. The notices advertising the application have been on display at the premise and published in the Berry Free Press in the 4th of March 2022 edition. Full details of the proposed activities and timings are contained within the application form as attached Appendix A. The operating schedule steps proposed by the applicant to promote the 4 licensing objectives are attached as Appendix B. A hearing is necessary to determine the application following receipt of representations which have not been withdrawn. The subcommittee will be aware that its consideration is confined to the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives, and the need or commercial demand for licensed premises are not a consideration for the licensing authority when discharging its licensing functions. In carrying out its licensing functions, the licensing authority must have regard to its statement of licensing policy published under Section 5 of the Act. and any guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182. The licensing authority must carry out its functions under the Act with a view to promoting the licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, the protection of children from harm. Where revisions are made to the legislation or guidance issued by the Secretary of State, there may be a period of time when the local statement of licence and policy is inconsistent with these revisions. In these circumstances, the licensing authority will have regard and give appropriate weight to the relevant changes, guidance and its own statement of licence and policy. The licensing authority has not received any representations from the responsible authorities under the Licensing Act 2003. Further conditions have been agreed by the applicant on the 17th of March 2022 after mediation with an officer from Baber and Mid Suffolk District Council Environmental Protection Team. These are attached as Appendix D. There have been 23 representations received and made by other persons, which include local residents, businesses and residents associations. This is attached as Appendix E to this report. The subcommittee must, having regard to the representations made, take such of the steps, if any, as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, and that is to grant the licence subject to conditions which are consistent with the operating schedule accompanying the application, modified to such an extent that the authority considers appropriate for promotion of the licensing objectives and subject to any mandatory conditions which must be included in the licence, or to exclude from the scope of the licence any licensable activities to which the application relates, to refuse to specify a person in the licence as a premise supervisor, or to reject the application. Any party aggrieved by the decision taken by the licensing authority in respect of this application has a statutory right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court. That concludes my summary, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So can I ask Mr. Williams, do you have any questions for the officer at all?
No, none at all.
None, thank you. And Julia Ewan, do you have any questions? No. And Tracy Kettle, any questions for the officer? No. Councillor Flatman, do you have any questions for the officer? Councillor Muller? No, right. And thank you very much. So, Mr. Williams, if you would now like to present your case, and we'll hear from you now. Thank you. And if you press the button, and we should be able to hear you clearly. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the officials and the members of the committee for this very impressive hearing. I even feel apologetic at having caused our council to spend so much money on holding this kind of thing. I had no idea when I put in the application that it would come to this. I have absolutely no criticisms whatsoever of the Mid Suffolk and Baber licensing department, who've been very cooperative and helpful. But I guess this is democracy in action. What I do criticise somewhat is the, I would say, rather clumsy way one has to phrase applications under the 2003 Act. The rules change for small events up to 250. They change again for events up to 500 people, and then they change again at the 5,000 mark. So one is applying for a license for up to 5,000. Now, I know that this site at Wood Road would never hold 5,000 people. Its capacity might be 2.5, perhaps. I'd like to illustrate these kind of problems by explaining how this application came about. Hawley Park does not organise events at all, not even weddings. It earns its keep by hiring its historic and very nice property for events, small ones such as weddings in the barn, larger ones, and we have had a license for events on the main park for quite some time, but we actually only have one licensable event on the main park. It's called Alive and V Dubbin, and it is a 3-day camping event for VW enthusiasts to enjoy all the things associated with owning a camper van or a VW car. The most important part of our income is Hawley Park Barn, which is a successful wedding venue, and of course has struggled in the last 2 years, being shut for half the time. But we also have quite a number of smaller events in the park and on the Wood Road site, such as running events, cycling events, small ones, and they are not licensable activities. We have 2 large events in and around the barn and main house. A thing called Weird and Wonderful Wood, which again hasn't happened for the last 2 years, but hopefully will be happening in May. And we have an event called Spectacle of Light in February. Both of these events, we don't do weddings in February, so Spectacle of Light doesn't interfere with that. We do weddings at the time when Alive and V Dubbin happens, but it happens, it is planned well ahead, earlier than the time when people might be booking a wedding. And it uses the main entrance to Hawley Park on the Old Bury Road, shall we call it. That has good access to both, in both directions, to the A14. Alive and V Dubbin is a very well-organised event that came to us having outgrown Jimmy's farm, it started with us in 2017, and we've had 3 events. It happens in the main park. As far as I know, it causes very little complaints, and I can vouch for the fact that it's well organised. And the organisers of Alive and V Dubbin came to me and said, look, we have obviously suffered financially in the last 2 years. We would like to hold a fundraising event. And I said, well, we won't. The barn is very fully booked with weddings this year, many postponements from last year and even the year before. It will be difficult to find a date. And they said, well, could we hold it in Wood Road? And on the Wood Road site, it's a site that they have used as part of their main event for quiet camping and for day visitor parking, non-licensable events or activities. I said to them, well, it's not licensed, and I know how important it is to event organisers to be running a bar and having music and so on. And they said, okay, well, we'll get a licence. And I said, well, how much is that going to cost you? And they said, well, it's about £1,100, I think. And I said, well, for a fundraising event, that's a pretty bad start. What if we apply for the licence, which then becomes a more permanent thing? And I know that if we apply for a licence, it costs around about the £180, £190 a year mark. And so it was on that basis that I went ahead to apply for a licence. And the problem with the Act is that an event organiser like us applying for a licence does not know who is going to want to hold an event on that piece of land. We don't know the size of the event. We don't know how many will come along. So we're working in the dark. And obviously that means that you tend to exaggerate or apply for the maximum number of events at different levels that you could possibly imagine holding on that site. We asked for 15. Now, this is another awkward aspect, or clumsy aspect, I think, of the Act. We asked for 15 event days. Now, that doesn't mean 15 events. 15 event days up to a capacity of 5,000, which we can't use anyway. An event on an outside event is likely to be a camping event, and as is the one they want to hold, the fundraising event they want to hold, which actually is happening starting this very day on Wood Road site, but without any licensable activities going on, and with much reduced participation by the public, by the campers. So that's an awkward aspect. You ask for as many as you can get, and it's really, I suppose, up to this meeting and the council perhaps to cut us down if they feel they want to. We only have one other event booked for this year on the Wood Road site, and it's by the same organisers who in July want to extend their activities from just old VW campers to other makes of classic cars and hold an event, a camping event for classic car owners in July. They want to try to hold it anyway. They have already planned out what their use of the site would be, and they estimate that they have space for 288 campers, pitches for 288 campers. I suppose there would be perhaps 3 or 4 people per site, so we're talking about roughly 1,000 people there. And that actually leaves enough space for a further 700 places for day visitors to park. They estimate that in terms of capacity, this site will never hold an event bigger than that, and it will be somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000. We had a visit from the environmental sound engineer who expressed basic approval of the operation, subject to certain limits that he wishes us to abide by, which we will. In addition, we have proposed in our application that we will always have a phone number at the entrance to the site that people can ring if they have any complaints. Only Bracken Lodge and Loke Farm are within 500 metres of the source of the sound. They are the only houses. They are directly opposite this site on the other side of Wood Road. They are somewhat protected by the lie of the land, which dips down towards them. So, and as far as I would imagine, their living rooms and gardens face the other way towards the west. The houses in Borley Green, from which we've received many objections, the nearest one is about 650 metres away from the source of the sound, and the furthest is over a kilometre away. There is a bit of an elephant in this room, though. This is a licensing inquiry, and the vast majority of the objections appear to be on the basis of traffic nuisance on Wood Road, which I think technically is beyond the remit of the licence hearing, although if maybe comes under public nuisance, I don't know. There will be traffic to and from the site. Neither the police nor other agencies involved with roads or safety have raised any objections to our application. We have replaced the gate onto Wood Road, which has been there, well, for probably centuries. The gate is a single 12-foot gate. We've replaced it with two 10-foot gates to create a two-way access point there. The actual opening onto the road itself has always been wide enough for two-way. And we have also got a long track within the site towards where the centre of any events is likely to be, which is, I think you've seen on the map, I expect, in the corner formed by the two woodland sides, because that's where water is. And we can create a queuing lane of up to 180 metres to avoid any tailback onto the road. Our traffic will tend to be off-peak, given the fact that events are likely to be at a weekend. We judging by what Alive and VW have done in the past with traffic that has entered through that road, they put up notices directing all traffic to the right to go towards the old Bury Road, which is the main access to the A14. Our traffic is most, this, at least for this event, mostly coming from fairly far away. I don't think many people will want to go through Borley Green, and I do feel that we're being criticised almost, or we're being a victim of the existing traffic problem on Wood Road, which we will only marginally add to and at offbeat times. And we're also potentially might be a victim of the condition of Wood Road, and particularly Warren Lane, which is the straight bit that you turn in directly off Bury Road, and it's in very poor condition. I noticed that they've put up notices that patching on that road will be starting on Monday, this coming Monday, which is a day on which there will still be some clearance going on from the event that they're holding, the unlicensed event that they're holding. We will allow that clearance, and we can allow a lot of clearance from Wood Road to cross the park and use our main entrance, not the Wood Road entrance. In my experience, the worst thing on Wood Road is the bend, which is blinded by a line of trees, the bend where Wood Road turns into Warren Lane. That line of trees is so close to the road. It's not on our land, it's on the roadside verge. And it's vegetation there as well. And I would say that I'm very willing to cooperate with the council in trying to improve the sight lines on that bend, which I find the worst aspect of the road. I hope this addresses some of your concerns. I mean, we basically don't know what's likely to happen on that road. We don't have a reputation for raves. We are not what's it called? Latitude. We are not a V festival. We won't have events where the main event is, or the main object is loud music. The nature of the site is peace and quiet. That's what people come for, and the countryside. So I hope this addresses some of your concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. If you'd like to turn the thing off. I've got several questions. It's not going to be the Spanish Inquisition, but I do have several questions myself, and my good colleagues will. But one of the most important ones I've got before we sort of go down, I'll let my colleagues have a go before I ask all of them. Have you had planning permission for change of use of agricultural or arable land for these activities?
No, I don't think I have. It is, but it is not agricultural land.
It was arable land with sheep
It is
on it, wasn't it?
parkland, and
parkland,
it is grazed by sheep.
Yeah. I know the area extremely well. I used to live in Woolpit, so I know the area.
Yeah.
So the answer to that at the moment is no. That might be an issue that we might have to look at, but not within our guises, but you might have to look at a later date. So I've asked that question, so I'll let my colleagues ask their questions because I've got a list of others.
By sheep for most of the time.
That would be a planning
we
issue
have to keep
debate.
the sheep off it before any event. 3 weeks before any event, we have to keep
That
the sheep.
would be a planning issue that would have to be addressed, possibly.
Yes,
And I'll call on my legal advisor.
Yeah, perhaps I could just assist a little bit. There are certain permitted development rights where you can hold so many events without seeking planning permission. But when you get above a certain threshold, there may be a requirement for change of use through the planning system. So it may be something after today you may want to approach the local planning authority to discuss that. Yes, I mean, unfortunately we can't give that information here because we don't necessarily know it, and it'll be for our planning colleagues to advise in that respect. Okay.
Thank you for that assistance. I can just advise you I am Chairman of Planning at Mid-Suffolk District Council, so that one was to my fore. And what people have to understand is planning and licensing are two separate things. So anyway, I will ask my colleagues if they have questions of you, and then I have a few myself that they may well cover. As I say, it's not the Spanish Inquisition, it's just finding information. All right? So, Councillor Flatman, do you have a question?
You have mentioned that you move the traffic across to the main entrance for Monday. Is there any likelihood that you would be able to do that when it's a really busy time with the cars leaving, to go across that route at all? Just to ease things, would it be possible to do that?
On a Sunday, weddings happen on a Saturday. Our wedding business is the vastly most important thing to us.
Yeah.
And we do sell it, the barn, on the basis of exclusivity. And the drive through the park is an important part of that. I've heard people say, I knew this was where we'd have our wedding when we were driving up the park.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Councillor Holland.
Yeah, thank you. No, that was exactly the same question I was going to ask, Chair. So thank you very much. Thank you.
See that I've got quite a few questions. As I say, it's for clarity. One question. Have you engaged with the parish council and the local people before coming here today? Have you, knowing that you've had all the
Woolpit
issues?
Parish Council, with respect, we are a forgotten corner of Woolpit Parish. We're a little triangle, or part of it, north of the A14. And judging by the fact that they have allowed 3 very large warehouses to be built the other side of Warren Lane.
That's planning, and that's not necessarily down to the parish council.
No, but I mean, frankly, I'm not sure Woolpit is aware that we actually have more land in Woolpit than we do in any other parish.
So at the moment, the answer would be we haven't had that conversation with them just yet.
The woods at Hawley Park are called Woolpit Woods.
Yeah. So that's fine. So I've asked that one. Now each person, you're saying the VW group that come along, and I mean I know at Helmingham Hall they have events up there with the cars. You know, they have the classic cars and things like that. So it's a similar sort of thing that it looks like you promote there. So if the licence wasn't granted today, the individuals could still apply for the licence, and you would consider, bearing in mind that we might have a change of use, but park that for 1 minute, you would consider people still coming to you should the licence not be approved today. You would still consider letting that facility go
getting
forward.
their own licence.
Yes.
Yes, if they're willing to fork out £1,100 for
yeah, that wouldn't be your issue, that would be theirs, wouldn't it? Yeah. So that's something that we can just, again, park, if you'll excuse the pun being VW. And this is sort of a question I need to ask, but I know the answer to it, but I think the public need to know it. You and your family have been there for many, many years, but should you decide to sell and move on, if this permission were granted, we'd have to have a fresh application and licence. Isn't that correct, Nigel? You know, if anybody new came, because clearly Mr. Williams saying, well, we don't want 5,000 there, so...
No, there wouldn't be an actual a new licence. There may be a transfer over to a new operator. Kay may be able to sort of highlight that.
Yes, Chair. A transfer could be submitted, or on leaving, Mr. Williams could surrender the licence, in which case a new one would have to be applied for.
Saying is that you wouldn't particularly want to have 5,000 there, but if the licence says you can, and even though the capacity might not be there, you just don't know what happens to the future.
I do understand that our licence needs to be renewed every 3 years, does it not?
No, that's not correct. You pay an annual fee. It runs concurrent. It's just an annual fee you pay.
Okay.
Indeed. So that was that. I'm not sure whether this would have come within the environmental thing and that, but with all these campers and everything, what are the toilet facilities?
Well, they would bring in, if they don't have toilets on their camper vans, which some do, there would be autoroutes brought in.
They would provide them, trailer them in and sort of thing. Yeah, lovely, thank you.
It could even be a trailer type.
Yeah.
Rather than a autoroute.
Right, yeah, that's fine. Hopefully on page 29, Appendix D, you said in your submission there that you will abide by the sound restrictions and so on. That's quite difficult. Sound carries, doesn't it? So how would you be able to monitor for yourself rather than waiting for someone to ring that number on the gate?
If there is amplified music on the site, there is a sound engineer who has to test it and make sure it stays below the 53 decibel or whatever it is level. Yes, I'm not expert in the numbers there.
So you're sort of self-regulating until somebody gets a bit excited and turns it up, and then somebody has to go and tell them to turn it down. Are you on site? Will you be around?
Well, I live on site, but I don't live on Wood Road. So.
No, I understand. Okay, so there'll be self-regulation, plus of course there'd be
I have a personal licence.
Yes, I realise that, yeah. Fine, well that's very helpful for me. So now I can ask... So first of all, I will ask the licensing officer if you have any further questions for Mr.
No, thank
Williams.
you, Chair.
No? And so I can come to the speakers who may have a question, if you like, for Mr. Williams. Do you have any questions first of all?
I think my questions are going to be more for you, for the legalities of licensing, because I hear what Mr. Williams says,
No, this is
and I
questions,
don't know. Yes, this is the problem. I hear what Mr. Williams says, but my interest is in if he says he doesn't want to hold raves or become Latitude, why is he applying?
Well,
for
I think
certain, but he's ticked a lot of boxes about live music and things. He could do a very simple ticking a box saying I like VW campers, but it doesn't make any sense.
You'll have the opportunity to make a statement.
But this is what I'm saying.
Do you have any questions at this time as to what Mr. Williams has just said?
But my question is how, I mean, do I get an opportunity to ask you at the end how Mr. Williams' statements can be put into some kind of legal position?
What the subcommittee will need to decide is whether the application as it is made with the conditions that have been applied would be would have a detrimental effect on any of the 4 licensing objectives. If there is a detrimental effect on any of the 4 licensing objectives, they may refuse the application, or they may amend the application, they may alter it. They may impose extra conditions, but the conditions should only be imposed if those conditions will prevent those licensing objectives being impacted on. That is the situation we're in now. We have to work with the application we've been put before us, your representations, and the guidance we're given through the legislation and through the guidance.
Thank you.
So unless you have any questions, like I say, you will have an opportunity to make your statement in a few minutes.
And may I also ask Tracy Kettle if you have any specific questions that you might like Mr. Williams to answer for you?
Yes, one that has come up that seems to me to be relevant is when a hirer comes to you, how much information do you obtain from them how they are going to use the site?
Well, on a big event of the kind, for example, the VW people organise, it's a requirement under our events licence that the organiser provides what's called an event management plan, EMP, with all the details of safety, and we have our own as well, because we have to make sure that our site is safe. These are quite large documents and quite thorough.
I have specifically in mind... Sorry. Specifically in mind the cycling and the running that have been happening for some time. These may not be licensed.
No, I think you need the questions specific to...
No, those wouldn't be licensable, so have no jurisdiction.
No, so in the future, if events are licensed, as far as amplified sound, tannoys, etc., you know what these hirers are going to be using the site for.
Well, I must say, it was news to me when I read in one of the objections that there was a tannoy used
Yes.
on that field. I was unaware of that. I mean, these running events are somewhat different from a sort of staying event, but I wasn't aware that there was a tannoy being used.
Which you can understand is a concern for the residents, that we
I
are
will
tolerating.
raise the question with our estate manager, who perhaps did know. We certainly hear the tannoy when Woolpit's steam rally happens in the field on the other side of Berry Road from us, or we used to. That again hasn't happened for a while, but they can be annoying.
Gosh, sorry, it just said, thank you. Any further questions as such from what you've heard from Mr. Williams? No, that's fine. Right, thank you very much for that. Present the case, go around the table. We now, please, from the Parish Council, if you'd like to present your case and issues, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I am chair of the Woolpit Parish Council. I'm sorry Mr. Williams feels that the Parish Council ignores him, but he ignores us. So we have a fairly good track record of objecting to the developments at Lawn Farm and such like. So, and I wish we were the planning body that made the decisions, because things would be very different in the village. Under planning applications, we are a statutory consultee, but we are not for licensing, and this has been very disappointing in this case, because if this application is successful, it will have serious implications for the parish, and in particular for the residents of Borley Green. You have received 23 objections, I believe, to this application, including those from the parish council and the district councillors. All the objections refer to the same concerns of public safety due to traffic and public nuisance, especially due to noise. Mrs. Cattle, who lives closest to the site, will be able to tell you firsthand of the nuisances from the current use of the site and how she and her neighbours will be affected if these proposals go ahead. Up to 45 days of events, most of which will be at weekends, takes away from neighbouring properties their right to enjoy their own homes. Mr. Williams has said that their living rooms and gardens are at the backs of their properties and won't be affected. Believe me, Mr. Williams, events on your site can be heard in one house in Shelland, not just a few hundred yards away in Borley Green. Add to this light pollution, traffic noise, traffic fumes, litter, and to the general hubbub that we already have from the A14, life will become intolerable. By its own admission, the applicant seeks to protect its wedding business at the main site by moving the disturbances that will arise from events taking place down to this, what they're calling the Wood Road site, and therefore onto local residents. In terms of traffic, Wood Road and Warren Lane are already the subject of investigation by Highways, championed by our county councillor. Add a huge number of vehicles attending events, and the use of the road will just become impassable. I appreciate that the licensing regulations seek to regulate the licensed premises, and what happens on public roads adjacent to the site may not be under your control. But I urge you, as you say in your own notes, to take a holistic approach. The proposed route on Wood Road is unsustainable. It's unsuitable to take additional volumes of traffic. The road is narrow and has been severely damaged by what I understand by traffic engineers is called haunching, where vehicles actually put two wheels onto the verge. There are potholes and tight corners. I was very alarmed to see that Mr. Williams thinks that we should be chopping down trees just to accommodate his proposals. Whatever is promised, there will be queuing traffic if there are large events. I urge you not to grant this application. Now, sometimes when I appear before the planning committee, there is discussion about if you were minded to grant a consent, what might be acceptable. There is very little here that is acceptable, but I would emphasise, as has already been mentioned by other councillors, that the access should be through Hawley Park main entrance and not off Wood Road. I no more than Mr. Williams understand all this description of decibels and hertz and various things, but I think you will find from the experiences of local residents that it is very difficult to abate noise, and what is acceptable to a sound engineer used to working in that industry is not acceptable in the British countryside. And I would also urge that if you were minded to grant a licence, that it would be for a very limited number of days. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask my fellow councillors if you have any questions for Mrs. Ewan? No. And the officers, do you have any questions?
Oh, thank you, Chair.
No?
No, thank you, Chair.
And Mr. Williams, do you have any questions for the parish council? You might want to make a statement, but that's not a question. So could you, if you have a question, you're more than welcome. And
I slightly resent her remarks about cutting
Mr.
down
Williams,
trees.
you will have an opportunity to sum up at the end if you want to make any final comments to address anything
We
you've heard
plant an
today.
awful lot of trees.
so thank you, Mrs. Ewan, for your presentation there. I now move on to your colleague, Tracy Kettle. If you would like to present your case, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. You have already said that you've read the 23 objections and they've been taken into account. So, as one of the two residents opposite Hawley Park, myself and Joss and our neighbours Trevor and Emma Jackson at Bracken Lodge, we share the west side border of the Hawley Park Road site.
Excuse me a minute, can we just... I can't quite hear the... Oh, could you speak up a little, perhaps if you move the microphone towards you? It is quite difficult. We end up sort of shouting at it because we're used to it. So could you speak up? Thank you.
I can. Bracken Lodge is not shown on the map that we were given, but for those that don't know, it is opposite the site entrance. The Wood Road site has no natural tree line or barrier on the western boundary, so both our houses have an unopposed view to the north and eastern tree line. Very attractive until we have 45 functions per year with nothing to absorb or deflect noise, and the land may become a car park or a campsite. The northern boundary is flat to where the car track will be, and the performance area at the top northeast corner furthest from Wood Road. The line of sight from Bracken Lodge is unopposed at ground level and hence at first floor level. Loke Farm looks towards the performance area from a slightly different angle but still faces directly into the northeast corner. There is nothing to deaden or soften the noise or the light in the vast open area. The controls imposed by environmental and licensing authorities will not have as good an outcome as might be possible with an enclosed property. Noise from the 24-acre site will be uncontrollable. It will also be directly affected by weather conditions and wind direction. Any complaints of noise are to be logged by the site or the event organiser, which does not stop us having to endure the noise levels. And as Julia referred, we have no idea what 53 decibels is. It can sound dreadful. How do we know? We do not have sound measuring equipment, and after the event we'll be unable to prove levels with certainty. The attractive line of trees forming a right-angled northern eastern barrier will become a deflector of the noise emanating from functions held on the Wood Road site. We are in a rural area and have doors and windows open on summer nights and evenings. Will this continue when we have 45 functions, mostly in the summer and mostly with amplified noise? I acknowledge the comments that Mr. Williams has made regarding the cumbersome nature of the application and having to apply for more than necessary in order to achieve as Hawley Park wishes. But once in place, the licence stands, and evolution and development of the events will be well outside of our control. I also acknowledge that at the moment you are involved with the Hawley Park Limited, but as a limited company holding the licence, that is not going to just be you. So we are at the mercy of whoever chooses to develop the business. And it's that evolution that is a concern. And as I wanted to mention before but couldn't, the running and the cycling events were exactly that. There were stakes and there was tracks marked out, and a few cars came and parked, and sometimes quite a few. They ran, they raced, they did what they did, and they went home. But that has evolved, clearly without your knowledge, into a tannoy system of commenting on the race and the starters and the success. And as soon as that tannoy finishes, there is amplified music, as is the case in a lot of American or now British athletics meetings. So that is already happening, but we tolerate that because they're few and far between. But that has given us great cause to be concerned that should this license allow 45 functions per year, we will have so little control of what happens. That sort of thing may indicate what is going to happen in the future. And that noises directly into our house. At the moment, cycling and racing occur mostly in the mornings, weekend mornings. People are in and they're out, but the events could be longer. So it wasn't a question, sorry. What starts as tolerable will so easily become intolerable. And once this license is in place, we have very little recourse. If this license is granted, it will have a great effect on our two houses' peaceful enjoyment, and as you can see, the 23 objections of residents slightly further away, but nonetheless equally as disturbed as we are. I noticed at the start of this that you referred to documents to be submitted. Is it permissible for me to give you some photographs? No. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. The drive at Bracken Lodge is 12 of my little short paces from the drive of Hawley Park. And I parked my car in the drive of Hawley Park and straight, and it's looking directly onto Bracken Lodge. Now, any vehicles exiting that site at night, during the day for noise, but at night, are going to shine their lights on that house. Vehicles turning right, vehicles turning left, Bracken Lodge is going to be severely affected. Quite a few of these functions have the possibility of going to 11:30 and sometimes to midnight, with an hour to exit the site. That's a long time for the more successful events, which may or may not happen or may be developed. That's a long time for that noise and light to be endured by the residents of Bracken Lodge. The light pollution from the performance area, because the nature of it's completely open, because the nature of the site, the tree line, north and east, will absorb nothing to do with light. The light will be there, and this morning, or early hours this morning when it was still dark, my curtains are open. My first floor window faces Hawley Park with a very nice view right the way through to what will be the performance area shown on the map. The light will be pulsing off my walls. It doesn't have to be shone into my windows to be a nuisance. So there's likely to be, with live music, strobe lights, flashing stage lights, floodlights, lights from vehicles, etc., etc. That will be in my window, and it clearly will be in Bracken Lodge's window as well. We are a rural area, and we do not need blackout blinds. We certainly don't have to have our curtains shut. We are not overlooked, but this could have a great effect on how we live our lives. Also, on your map or on your submissions, there's no designated area where parking or camping will or will not be. which I presume means that you are able to have that as each hirer chooses to. The road between Loke Farm and the site is 6 paces, my little short legs. If camping or parking is opposite us, as has been the case for a few daytime events where cars have been parked the other side of the road, we will have people noise, car noise and headlights in our windows, potentially any time up to 1 a.m. There is no restriction in any of this on that. There is nobody has paid heed to these 2 properties that face you. The attendees are there to enjoy their time and not to respect our peace. We don't expect that of them. But they should not be near enough, or indeed even ever be there, because it's too close. Assuming some degree of proportion on the map provided, our 2 houses are 3 to 4 times closer to the hatched marquee tents performance area than the current site of Alive and Dubbin are to the barn. The Alive and Dubbin along the road from the main entrance. 3 to 4 times closer. How is that fair with no consideration of our properties? The quiet enjoyment of our properties overlooking Hawley Park will be taken away if this licence is granted. 45 occasions per year, mostly in the summer, potentially any of the 7 days per week, up to midnight. Bank holidays and New Year's Eve for all categories of function. Granting this licence will be detrimental to our lives. There are vast expanses of land on Hawley Park, the management of which is none of my business, but surely there's a better way to use your land rather than move the concerns that you have that this new arm of your business will be detrimental to yourselves. You have moved that concern to the 2 properties opposite you and the people on Wood Road and Warren Lane and down to Borley Green. We will all be affected by this, and it is just not acceptable. So I really do urge that this licence is not granted.
Thank you very much indeed. That was very helpful and very full. Thank you. Can I ask my officers, do you have any questions? Councillor Muller? Kerry?
No, thank you, Chair.
Kerry? No, thank you, Chair. And Mr Williams, do you have a specific question? You may sum up at the end of your views, etc., but do you have a specific question for Mrs Kettle? No, because you will just have the opportunity very shortly to sum up, in fact. Now then, normally what happens in a meeting such as this is we have the specified speakers, and I am aware of the locale, and I have made an analysis of all the points that people have made representations of, and a lot of it is traffic and noise. Specifically on the things that have come to us to look at. I spoke with the legal officer, and he's asked me to allow, if there are any points that haven't been raised by anybody, to the members of the public who are sitting here. It's quite out of the ordinary to do this, but are there any points that haven't been raised or covered that you feel you would like to make a point on? So I've got the 3 main ones, are noise, traffic and light pollution, plus of course the finer details as provided by the 2 ladies here. So is there anybody who feels there's anything missing from your speakers? I will allow you a minute or so just to make comment.
If I could just clarify, Chair, that's anything that you've already put in your written representations. So something that's been put in your written representations that you feel has not been highlighted. So it's not an opportunity to bring up something new. It's just something that you feel may not have been elaborated on sufficiently.
I'll give you a few minutes to think. Yes, could you make your name, please?
My name is Robin White. I live in the Oaks in Borley Green.
And have made a representation?
Well, I have made a representation, yes. There was nothing mentioned about nature. There is a herd of red deer in Borley Green in Wood. What's it? What wood is that?
Well, I'm not sure what it's called actually.
Woolpit Wood. I'm sure the noise pollution would affect that. They often walk across the road into the adjacent fields to graze and then come back again. I'm sure the noise pollution and light pollution would affect their way of life. Also, when you've got large amount of cars moving down that road at night, the deer will walk across the road. They'll just move on.
That's a good point made, and I've made a note of that. When we go into private session, we'll include that in our discussions. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
We can let that move forward. Right, so thank you very much indeed. So providing it's in your paper. Yep, please. Tell me your name, please.
Yeah, my name's Martin Wood. I live in the Oaks, Borley Green. It's a question around who has the responsibility for ensuring that the maximum number of events per annum doesn't exceed any part of the licence if it's given, and in the same vein, who has responsibility for monitoring and ensuring the amplified music levels are in line with any specified limits?
Can you answer on that one?
We are limited to the general public raising concerns in certain aspects. There are certain enforcement powers that officers can carry out to monitor. Generally speaking, it's brought to the council's attention by the general public when things are not being complied with, particularly with noise and issues like that. So what was the second part of your question?
Who monitors the sounds?
Well,
there's a number of events as well.
Yes, I mean the number of events will be monitored. Again, I'm sure if you know, records will be kept by the local public. If they feel that they're exceeding, and that will be investigated. They are required to carry out and inform the local authority when they're having these events through the management plan. So I believe it's in one of the conditions.
Is that to Mid Suffolk or to Woolpit?
No, it'll be to the licensing authority.
So it'll be Mid
Suffolk. Yeah, and with regard to the actual monitoring of the noise, as specified, that they have to have checks by qualified engineers when they're setting up this equipment as well, in accordance with the conditions.
Okay.
If it's already in your papers and it hasn't been covered, but we mustn't make too.
But well, it hasn't been covered, but Wood Road and Warren Lane are a designated cycle route.
Yeah, that's outside the...
Is it? I just put it down as safety.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Right, so do we have any questions, members? Do we have any further questions for anyone? Officers? No? Right, so it now comes to the closing submission. We have the licensing officer to give a closing statement, and then I will ask the applicant to close. You always have the final say before we go into private session. So, Kay, anything?
No, I have nothing further to add, Chair, thanks.
So, Mr. Williams, it's over to you to sum up and give us your final thoughts on this, please, so that we can then go off into session.
Well, I've explained that, in actual fact, we only have one event this year booked. The fact that we've applied for, is it 30 event days for the smaller events and 15 event days for the larger events, and even the larger events not likely to be more than attendance of about 2,500. These are going to be small events, mostly, and there will not be many of them. There certainly won't be 45 days of the year occupied with events. Borley Green is a long way away, and I'm very surprised you can even hear us. There's an awful lot of woodland between us and you. That must absorb some of the sound. Loke Farm is much closer, obviously, but unless I'm much mistaken, you are at quite a considerably lower level than the bank on our side of the road. I'm very surprised you can actually see over that. Bracken Lodge is, I've stood in front of Bracken Lodge. I've looked towards where a marquee would be in that corner of the site, which is surrounded by woods. And I reckon I could probably see the top of the marquee, but not the first, like, 7 foot of it or so. The traffic, well, as I say, that's not strictly for this particular inquiry, but I've explained that we have had events on that site, and we do direct traffic towards the Old Bury Road. The quickest way anyway from that site entrance to the A14, even by sat-nav, I would imagine it's via Warren Lane into Elmswell and to J47. But as I say, this application makes things look an awful lot more alarming than I believe they really will be. And, well, the entrance has been there probably long before most of the houses were built. In fact, the houses on which most of those Borley greenhouses were built is on land the gamekeeper inherited from a previous owner of Hawley Park, and was lucky enough to manage to get a lot of housing development on it. I think the important thing, perhaps, to say is that Hawley Park, as I said at the beginning, it has nothing other than the assets that are present on this site. It has no agricultural holding like, 2 centuries ago. I think the estate was 2,000 acres or something. This is the historic core of a very significant site, a grade 1 listed house, which takes an awful lot of upkeep, a grade 2 listed barn, and we have to struggle to earn enough money from our assets that we do have to do that, and it's been extremely difficult. I mean, we are surviving now because I've raided the buildings fund, if you like, to keep Hawley Park Limited afloat. Although I do have to say that the rates rebate from Mid-Suffolk District Council and the government grants have been very helpful as well. So I think that's all I have to say. I hope that this will be allowed. I am prepared for numbers to be cut down if you wish to do that, because I do believe that I have maybe overstated our requirement. But it's very similar to our requirement on the main park. And I urge the council to approve this application.
Thank you very much indeed. So I think we've all had sufficient time, and the applicant is always last to present the case. But I must put forward this following motion. On the basis that the subcommittee considers that the public interest in excluding the public outweighs the public interest in its deliberation being held in public, it is resolved that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that it involves likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12 of the Act. On the grounds set out in the Regulation 14 brackets 2 of the Licensing Act 2003 brackets hearings, Regulations 2005. May I have a proposal and a seconder to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Muller. Thank you, Councillor Flackman. So the live stream will now be paused, and ourselves, we will disappear, you will not. There's too many of you to hide you. So we will now go out into private session. Thank you very much indeed. And the office. Well, thank you very much for your patience and welcome back. We have come to a decision. There's quite a lot involved in it, so I'm going to ask Nigel to advise what the outcome is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The subcommittee have listened to all the representations and read all the written representations and have considered the impacts on the amenity of the local residents and local wildlife, and have noted all those concerns. They also note that the subcommittee acknowledges that the applicant's desire and needs to utilise his property to operate his business to its best potential within the legislation set out under the 4 licensing objectives. And the decision is that a licence will be granted, but it will be modified to such an extent as the subcommittee feels it mitigates the concerns. The 2 licensing objectives that they considered and that were put before them really today were the public safety aspects resulting from the use of the local roads, and also the public nuisance from the noise and the light pollutions. I'll just touch on the traffic concerns and the public safety aspect first. Government guidance states that licence holders have a responsibility to ensure the safety of those using the premises. Access to the site is by public maintainable highway, and the applicant has a reasonable expectation to utilise those roads for his business. Also, it is a matter for individuals to take personal responsibility for their behaviour when they're away from the licensed premises. So that the public safety aspect, following the government guidance, really relates to the public safety using the premises. That's not to say that there isn't an issue with the public safety of accessing and leaving the premises and the procedures in place, but the subcommittee on this occasion have felt that that's not a reason to refuse the application. Moving on to public nuisance, and firstly the issue of noise. The subcommittee notes that the Environmental Protection Team have agreed conditions relating to noise limits, but there is still a concern that there will be disturbance caused to the local residents, particularly the closest dwellings, and therefore the timing of all licensable activities will end at 11 p.m. The seasonal variation for New Year's Eve to midnight is approved, but the other seasonal variations are not. There are also, with regard to light pollution, there is going to be a prohibition on the use of fireworks to limit the impact of noise and disturbance to the local residents and to the local wildlife, and a further condition prohibiting the use of all laser lighting and strobe lighting at any event. Other conditions have been amended. In particular, condition 2.5, which refers to the maximum number of large outdoor events, that is to be reduced from 15 down to 5, with a maximum attendance of 2,500. And the maximum number of medium outdoor events will be reduced from 30 to 15. And these reductions are made in accordance to reduce the public nuisance and the frequency of those potential events causing that nuisance. On condition 2.10, which states that the premises licence holder shall ensure that all larger and medium event organisers or premises users prepare and operate a suitable and sufficient event management plan, that copies of those will be provided to the local authority, and those will be obviously provided before the events take place. And it's also noted that there is, for the larger events, an event management plan will also be provided to the local authority beforehand. I think it was 4 months ahead, or was it 2 months? I can't So 2 months. So that was condition 2.14, which is acknowledged. That's not altered, but I'm just highlighting that there is a condition that the local licensing authority will need to approve the event management plans for those events. So that is, I believe I've covered everything. Thank you. There is a right of appeal. Anyone who's made an application or a representation to the licensing authority has a right of appeal against the decision or against any condition or restriction applied by the local licensing authority, and appeals should be made to the Magistrates' Court within 21 days of receiving written notification of the Council's decision. I will now hand back to the Chair, who has a few comments to make.
Thank you very much indeed. As a subcommittee, we are limited to the 4 licensing objectives, and the one that we've looked at in detail is the public nuisance, and have adjusted the permissions accordingly. We might also encourage the use of the main entrance for vehicles where possible. We can only ask. I know this isn't the outcome for either side, and although not a licensing issue, planning permission for erection of marquees, change of use of land, the exit may be needed and should be pursued, and any highways issues may be addressed at that time. Can I also add that the licence can be reviewed at any time if necessary. So it's been very difficult for us, and that is the decision that we've made today. My words are informative. Thank you very much for your attendance and your input today, everybody. Thank you. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.